for joining us for today's Ipsos webinar exploring insights from the Ipsos new Canadian community and opportunities for brands. Today's webinar is being presented by Robin Seed. So now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce Robin Seed, Vice President in Ipsos's UU Online Communities team. Robin, you have the floor.
Great, thank you so much for the introduction, Ellen. Thank you to everybody for joining today's webinar. I'm looking forward to sharing some insights on new Canadians with you. Before we do that, just wanted to introduce myself. I am the Vice President for Online Communities here in Canada. If you haven't picked up from my accent already, I am South African. In fact, I've only been in Canada for the last 9 months. So I am a newcomer to Canada myself. And I must say, working on this project with other Canadian newcomers, it has been really quite an eye-opener, and it's been quite incredible working with other new Canadians, doing this research with them, and really relating to their stories that they had to share with us. So I know that there's quite a few people on this call today. I'm sure some of you are newcomers yourself. So I'm hoping as I go through these results and insights with you, you'll find some pieces of information that you can relate to yourself. So we know that new Canadians has been a hot topic for some time now. It is a hot topic right now, if not more so than ever right now, and it's going to continue to be a hot topic down the line. And we know why newcomers are a hot topic. I mean, Canada has an aging population, which means that there's low birth rates, which means that the population is in decline. So Canada has to bring in immigrants. So there's a little article here from CBC News that I put up there that came out the other day. Canada welcomed over 1 million people in the year 2022. About 400,000 of them, just over 400,000 of them are permanent residents. Another 600,000 of them are temporary residents, so either on work permits or study visas, whatever it might be. But after doing the research with new Canadians, we found that a lot of them that are here temporarily is not their end goal. They are going to look to take the process further and move into permanent residence and further down the line citizenship. So 1 million people coming into Canada is an extremely large number on a yearly basis. These are 1 million people that have been in Canada for a year or less already. So really fresh into Canada. And with this being said, marketing to newcomers now really requires different approaches, and brands are challenged in many ways in how they actually can communicate to newcomers. So historically, there's always been a bit of an information gap. So there's a lot of research out there on Canadian newcomers. But what the gap is that research focuses on, it could focus on Canadians that have been in the country up to 10 years, 5 years, 3 years. Those Canadians are established newcomers already in Canada, and they have very different needs to new newcomers who have just arrived in Canada. So because of this gap, we knew it was important to understand the journey and their needs in granular detail from newcomers that have just arrived in the country. So we built a community of 350 plus new Canadians who have been in the country for 24 months or less, which is continuing to grow. We are continuously growing this community base. And using an online community as a tool to do this sort of research has proven to be one of the best tools that we possibly could have used. And the reason being is online communities are built for engagement and dialogue with the community members. And I've worked on a lot of communities in my career at Ipsos. And I must say, this community is probably one of the most engaged communities I've ever worked with. The reason being is that they've been through a life-changing event. They've completely flipped their lives upside down. A lot of them have come here with no friends, no family, or anything like that. And what we did with the community is we gave them a platform to share their stories and experiences in the hope that they can make the arrival in Canada a little bit easier for other newcomers. So giving them this platform to actually share their experiences is something that they grasped immediately. So the insights that we got were really, really quite incredible, which made the online community such a great platform. So this community that we have is still very much alive. It's going to continue to grow. It's available for our clients to tap into. They are pre-recruited, so really fast turnaround research. So these members are available 24/7. So this presentation today, we really want to focus a little bit on gaining an understanding of the journey to Canada, the journey that newcomers go through and how they start to establish a new life in Canada, and highlight some early stage brand opportunities. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. We do have a lot more data from the research that we have collected with the community. And like I've said, this community lives on for any bespoke or any sort of research that you might want to do with newcomers that have been in the country for 24 months or less. So although the reasons for coming to, for immigrants wanting to immigrate might be different depending on where they're coming from, where they are in their life stages, but the experiences that they actually go through coming to Canada, regardless of where they come from, are similar in every way. So to start off our session today, let's look at some of the main reasons why people are actually immigrating. Not why they're coming to Canada, why are they choosing to immigrate? So from our community, many of the members are actually wanting to escape violent and unsafe situations in their home country. It might be because of war, crime and violence, political unrest, corruption within the government, lack of public welfare and development. These are a lot of reasons why people want to leave the country. But what happens when people have children? When you have children, there's a much bigger driving force behind people wanting to actually immigrate into the country, immigrate into another country. So when children are involved, parents feel, I need to give my children the best life that they possibly can. And in the country that is my home, I'm not going to be able to provide that for my children. So I wanted to read out one of the quotes from one of our community members that actually ties this together quite nicely. This community member said, "It was a decision that needed to be made sooner than later. The current state of affairs in my home country were becoming more and more alarming. We found ourselves living in cages, heavy home security, and constantly worrying about our children's safety. The amount of corruption within the government is unbelievable, crippling a once strong economy, allowing crime to run rife. Our children's future was our priority, and the only way to ensure a better life for them was to leave." So that sums it up quite nicely. We had a lot of community members echoing the same sort of sentiment. And then we have stagnation in work and career paths. So this is more so with the younger members, and coming from countries with much larger populations where competition is high, there's very little economic growth. So their opportunities to grow in their careers are actually diminishing. And they feel that the only way that they can actually succeed in their careers and actually grow individually is to leave their home country. Taking all of these points and trying to bundle them into one, what they're essentially doing is they're wanting a better life, whether it's for their children or whether it's for themselves. So all in all, people decide to immigrate because they are in search of a better life. So now we know why people are immigrating, some of the choices that they make to actually, I need to immigrate, I need to get out. But why are they choosing Canada? What makes Canada so special? And a lot of these things that come up, a lot of you will already know. Canada is an open and welcoming economy. Canada is known for being open to bringing in immigrants, and it is perceived as being a relatively easy process compared to some countries such as the US, UK, Australia. Canada is seen as a country that is easier for them to actually move to. It has a developed economy. Growth opportunities are better in Canada. Canada is multicultural. Everybody knows that. Just look around you. It's actually quite incredible. And being a newcomer myself, this is one country that I've visited a bunch of countries, but coming to Canada is the one place where I don't feel like a foreigner. And it's because of that multicultural, which is actually really great. Peaceful and non-toxic environment. So Canada has very low crime rates, and that is a huge driving force behind a lot of people. Canadians are polite and kind. Your reputation is very true. And it's a country with welfare and infrastructure. Things work. You have water, you have electricity. These are things that people are wanting to leave their country to experience. Freedom of speech. Newcomers can live as they are in Canada. So coming into the main part of this webinar, we now understand why immigrants are wanting to immigrate. We now understand why they want to move to Canada. So now they've made the decision that I am going to immigrate to Canada. What are some of the journey phases that they actually go through? So we built these journey phases based on the research. We didn't group them before we spoke to them. These came out naturally. So the way that we've created the journey is the pre-arrival phase. This starts with that initial decision to actually move to Canada, and I'm going to go through that in a lot of detail next. But before that, they're coming out of pre-arrival, they come into a waiting period, which is almost a subgroup of the pre-arrival, but it is very different. The needs and the sort of decision processes and the way that they research is very different from the pre-arrival into the waiting period. From there is post-arrival. They land in Canada, and now they actually get to experience what Canada is all about. And then settling in, we'll end off the webinar in the last phase there. So jumping into it, what is the pre-arrival phase? This is the phase where the decision is made to move to Canada. This phase can take a long time. It can take years for some people. This is where you have an endless list of things that you need to do. And because of that, it creates a lot of anxiety and fear. Newcomers or people wanting to immigrate rely heavily on social media and friends networks of people that might be in Canada already to help them with the research to understand the lay of the land in Canada. So what are some of the steps or some of the things that newcomers have to do in preparation for the big move? They need to start wrapping up their life in their home country. They need to settle all of their finances. They need to cancel services such as cellular contracts, home internet, cable TV. There's a long list of things that newcomers need to do. They need to figure out where they're going to live in Canada. They need to sell their properties. They need to make temporary living arrangements, and that's within their home country as well as when they first arrive in Canada. So a lot of people might have houses that they've sold, and it's very unpredictable the time frames from actually submitting your documents for your permanent residence or your work permits, whatever it might be. So that timing becomes quite difficult. So there's a chance that your property sells and then you have to wait a little bit and you need to figure out where you're going to live. You sell all of your belongings for most people. There are some people that would ship everything that they have, but there's a large portion that actually dismantle their old life. They sell everything that they have and they only keep a couple sentimental items with them. They need to take required exams. They need to do English tests, police clearances, and those sort of things. But the most important thing on this slide, and probably one of the main takeaways that you should take away from this, when they're in this phase, they're not researching brands. They're not researching where am I going to buy my furniture from. They're not researching where am I going to buy a car from. They're not researching who am I going to bank with, where am I going who's going to be my cellular provider. That is not what they're researching in this phase. What they are researching is everything about Canada. So where am I going to live in Canada? What's the weather like in Canada? What are some of the things that I can do once I arrive? So it's more Canada in general and not anything about the brand. So that's quite important. But finally, being mentally and emotionally prepared with this long list of things to do, with really difficult decisions that they have to make. It's all about being mentally and emotionally prepared. They need to prepare themselves for the actual move. And because of this, it creates a lot of uncertainty and anxiety. Within the pre-arrival phase, this is where we see the most uncertainty and anxiety. So what are some of the things that newcomers worry about in this phase, financial stability. So this is where they worry about starting from scratch. Canada has an extremely strong economy, and people coming from all over the world are likely coming from a weaker economy, which means that their currency is not worth as much as what it would have been in their home country as it is in Canada. So that's quite a difficult thing for them to actually overcome. Building a credit score. This came through from nearly every single person within our community. Not having a credit score is a major concern. Despite owning a house, owning cars, having a really good credit score at home, coming over to Canada as a newcomer, you start with absolutely nothing. So you have to build up this credit score. So some of the worries that they have is, am I going to be able to buy a car? Am I ever going to be able to own a house in Canada? Some of those struggles that they have. The next one being geographical, economic, and environmental challenges. These are things such as language barriers for people that where English isn't their first language. They're worrying about how am I actually going to fit in. A lot of them spoke about the harsh Canadian winters, and this isn't just newcomers that speak about this. Being here for 9 months now, I know that everybody talks about the weather, which is actually great. But the thing with newcomers is they don't know what to expect. Do I have the right coats? Do I have the right boots? The weather is a concern for them, as a lot of them can't even comprehend how cold -20 actually is, myself included. Social and cultural challenges. So when newcomers come over, some of them already have family here, which is great. They can build friends through family. They have that support structure, but a lot of them don't. And there's a huge worry about not having that support from friends and family and actually being able to forge relationships in a foreign land. How am I going to actually make friends? So there's that worry about being alone. And then finally, general immigration anxiety. Like I mentioned before, there's a long list of things to do. There's a lot of decisions. You've broken down your entire previous life. You've dismantled everything. And it causes a lot of anxiety, sort of tearing apart an old life. However, despite all of these challenges and difficult situations and decisions that they have to make and risks, there's a lot of excitement and thrill that comes with immigrating to a new country. And this is something that goes through all the phases in the journey. Yes, there are struggles. Yes, it is difficult, but there is that excitement. There's something really special about being able to start off fresh again in a country that gives you those opportunities to actually grow, where they can actually experience what it's like to live in a first world country, enjoying the nature and greenery. So a lot of people speak about how beautiful Canada is, and it really is a beautiful country. So there's that excitement that they get to sort of experience all of this beauty. And one that's really powerful is having peace of mind and not having to worry about their safety. As you saw earlier, a lot of people are leaving their home countries because it's unsafe. There's violent crime, war. Coming to Canada and not having to worry about that is a feeling that a lot of people are sort of longing for, and they can't wait to actually experience that. So as I've mentioned a couple times now, I'm a newcomer myself, and I could really relate to the majority of the things that people have said through the pre-arrival phase. So I wanted to bring in a bit of a personal story just to sort of tie everything together. This is a picture of my wife and 2 children. We're having dinner at our house, our last dinner at our house. The next day we have to move out of our house into an Airbnb. The build up to this last dinner was extremely emotional, stressful, a lot of anxiety, a lot of paperwork, but letting go of all of your belongings, you're stripping yourself, you almost feel naked where you don't own anything any longer. But anyway, things are moving along. We have sold our house. We think that we have planned our timing almost perfectly because we know that we can actually leave South Africa to come to Canada in 2 weeks' time. That means we only have to move into an Airbnb for 2 weeks before we can leave, which is very much doable. So from there, we move into the waiting period. And like I mentioned earlier, the waiting period is almost a sub-phase of the pre-arrival. This waiting period is once everything's been submitted, well, once all of your documents have been submitted. You don't really need to do anything more with your existing life. You're simply waiting for your permits, your visas, sort of that green light that you can actually hop on a plane now and you can go to Canada. But this period takes quite a bit of time. You can have a look at the guidelines that the website gives you, but they keep changing. So it becomes very difficult to actually pinpoint exactly when you can leave your home country. But it's extremely crucial, this period. If you remember in the pre-arrival period, I told you what they researched, Canada in general. They're not looking at brands or anything. But what you find within the waiting period, this is when they start to really explore different brands. So now they start looking at, where am I going to buy my furniture from? Where am I going to grocery shop? Who am I going to bank with? Where am I going to get some cards? Who should I use for my home internet? It's within this period when they start to frame opinions and perceptions about different brands, and it becomes part of their consideration set for when they actually do arrive in Canada. And a lot of newcomers also actually start to, or they attempt to acquire some products and services while they're in their home country. They have this time on their hands. They are in limbo. They're waiting. They know once they arrive in Canada, they've got a new list of things that they have to do. So while they're in this period, if they can start to tick off some of those things that they need to do while they're waiting, it relieves a lot of anxiety and things that they have to do. So we had people talking about filling up their shopping carts. So online stores, they would go in and they would select furniture, add them to the baskets. Some people would even purchase them before and select a delivery date for when they have arrived. We did see that coming through quite a bit. But this waiting period can be months. It can be years long. So it's really important for brands to make sure that they stay top of mind within the waiting period. What are some of the potential opportunities that lie in the pre-arrival and waiting period? We know that anxiety and uncertainty is really strong in this period. So is there a way for brands to redesign products that could basically give newcomers one less thing to worry about? Is there something that brands could do to give them comfort, certainty, and security? So for example, could we actually sign them up to services and products in their home country, giving them that one less thing to do? Can we offer in-language services? Can we give them that comfort and security of offering them guarantees or money-back guarantees on certain products that they might purchase before actually arriving in Canada? We need to leverage the strong networks, strong friend networks of people that do have family or friends already in Canada. For people that don't, we need to leverage social media. There are so many social media groups that newcomers join, and it's within those groups that they get recommendations on products and services that they should be using. So is there a way for brands to have a presence in these communities? Can we give testimonials of existing newcomers? But more importantly, we need to make most of this crucial period. Like I said, it can take weeks, months, years for some people. So we really need to try stay top of mind. So could we send them newsletters? Could we offer support for something maybe outside of the service that you do offer? Is there something that we can do to sort of help newcomers prepare for their life in Canada that is around the corner? So here's another personal story. So like you saw in the pre-arrival phase, I was leaving my house. This is a picture of the Airbnb that I moved into with my wife, 2 kids, and a cat. The expectation was that we were going to live here for 2 weeks. It has now been 3 months and 3 Airbnbs later, and we're still waiting to go. So this is where that uncertainty and unpredictability sort of comes in, where you can't actually plan to the T in the way that things are going to work. But we had a lot of time on our hands. We could actually start shopping around. We could start building these perceptions of different brands and who we're going to use, and sort of jotting that down so we know, okay, when we arrive, this is who we need to speak to, this is what we need to go with, and you can start planning everything within this waiting period. But finally, it comes time to go. This is an extremely emotional time. People that do have friends and family that they're leaving behind. This is a picture of me, my wife, and my 2 kids at the airport. We are on our way to Canada. We don't own anything. All of our belongings are in 8 suitcases that are coming with us, besides a couple sentimental things that we're bringing over. So it's extremely emotional. It's really sad. It's probably one of the hardest goodbyes that newcomers have to do. But there is that excitement. They've been in this limbo phase for such a long time that things are now moving forward. They are about to hop on a plane and go to Canada, and they can start to rebuild their life. And from there, we land in the post-arrival phase. So this is where expectations now start to meet reality. This is where the challenges become reality, but there is that excitement about starting over. So some of the challenges, I want to start off with a quote from one of our community members. They said, although we prepared ourselves by researching and studying, facing reality is very different from what one might plan for when one does not know. So what are some of those challenges that they face as soon as they arrive? That initial culture shock. People are different. The language barriers that they'd been worrying about in the sort of waiting period, that how are we going to actually do this? Now they experience that firsthand, where communication becomes a problem. A lot of them have challenges in finding work now that they've arrived. A lot of people do come over with jobs already lined up, but the ones that don't, they now need to try find some work. Finding long-term accommodation without a credit score. So the credit score comes through quite a bit here. And a lot of people coming over aren't going to actually arrive in the house in a property. They will stay in a hotel for a couple of weeks, sometimes months, before they can actually find their own property. So yes, they've arrived in Canada, but they still feel very much unsettled. Weather remains a big challenge. So we spoke about the weather a lot. It is a big challenge for most, but it is something that they eventually overcome. Juggling work or studies for students. So this is a lot of people coming over, start their jobs almost immediately. A lot of people get work, employment offers before they actually arrive in Canada. So the companies that have employed them have been waiting for them to actually land in Canada. So they don't really have much time before they actually start working. And that becomes really difficult when you're trying to build your life and get settled in, where you have to juggle work at the same time. A lot of people spoke about driver's licenses. This is a big struggle for some, because people not living in the city need a vehicle to get around, to go do their first shopping, to do everything. But there's a lot of countries where you can't do the exchange of your driver's license, and you can't purchase a new vehicle without a driver's license. So they need to rely on rentals, where they might be able to use an international license for a little bit. But only once they've gone through that process of either exchanging their license or redoing their tests, do they actually get to a point where they could actually purchase a car. Another challenge that they have is getting used to the cost of living, the high cost of living. And this is more so once they just arrive in Canada. And it's because they haven't got their first salary yet. Some people might be looking for jobs. So they're using their old currency of a lower value in a new country. Insurance is another example of that. Newcomers in Canada don't have any insurance history, so their insurance premiums are higher, and they worry about how we're going to afford all of this. But despite these challenges, again, there is that excitement that comes along with newcomers throughout this. They have now arrived in Canada. Canada is a beautiful country. There's so much to explore. It's large. They almost have the sense of being on holiday. They get to purchase new furniture. They can finally check out those baskets that they might have been filling in their home country. There's new products to try. Everything feels new. There's excitement about actually shopping around and trying to find their home where they can actually settle down after going through this entire journey. And for some that are in the market for vehicles, shopping for a car is something that is exciting. but it is a challenge to actually get to that point before they can actually purchase the car. So coming into another personal story, this was my first night in Canada. I was extremely fortunate that I was actually able to find a rental while I was still in South Africa. A lot of landlords don't lease properties to people until they've actually arrived in the country. But because our life was completely upside down and we'd been living in an Airbnb for 3 months already, we didn't want to arrive and have to still live in limbo and unsettled. So we were lucky enough to actually find a property that we could come straight to from the airport. But as you can see in the picture there, we have absolutely no furniture. So starting from scratch, but it is exciting. Things are great. We now have a home. We're not moving from Airbnb to Airbnb. We can now start to build up our life. And from here, we had furniture deliveries coming nonstop over the next couple of weeks and built up our house. So now we've followed the newcomer through their pre-arrival, the decisions and tasks that they have to do, the waiting period where they build perceptions around different brands, arriving in Canada, really things becoming a reality, some of the struggles that they have to go through, but now they can actually start to settle down. And settling down is when they start to feel a sense of belonging and accustomed to the new workings and the new way of life in Canada. So that really starts to come through in the settling down phase. But really important, maintaining ties back home comes through a lot when people are settling in. People have been through a life-changing event and they've left a life that they knew before. They started something completely new. And we can see it in their behavior in the settling in phase, that these ties back home that are more important to them than ever. So what do we see them starting to do? So newcomers now find home country communities. So people that have come over from the same country that they have, that have created a community. A lot of the time it's Facebook groups or WhatsApp groups where they actually get to people. A lot of the time the people live in the same area as them, so they can create get-togethers. And that's exactly what they do. They will arrange events and meetups where new Canadians from the same country get together. And this is valuable to them because they get to now go speak to people that have been through the same experiences that you've been through. You can share the same stories. They have a feeling that these people can relate to them. So these get-togethers give them that little taste of home. When they're settling in, they start missing flavors from home. So this is when they now start to explore foods from their home country, or try to figure out where can we get foods from home. That little taste of home gives them that sort of nostalgia of, I've been missing this, and this just sort of roots me again. Inviting family and friends to visit. So as you've seen throughout this presentation, I've shown you how difficult things can be. And because they have been so difficult, a lot of newcomers feel really proud when they are settled in with what they've been able to achieve and build. And they start to invite friends and family now, so they can show them, this is the reason why I've done this. They almost want to show off in a way that I left everything behind and I've come to a new country and look what I've been able to accomplish. So that comes through with a lot of people. But it's within the settling in phase that they can actually start to live their life again. And I found this really, really quite interesting when we spoke to them about what do they do for entertainment when they start settling in to Canada. And a lot of people were talking about large scale entertainment, like sporting events or concerts. And the reason being, which I really loved, is that going to these large scale events gives them that unique feeling of belonging. It's where they can mix with existing Canadians and they can shout for the same team. They can sing along to songs with other Canadians. And it's because of that large scale, those large scale events, that they feel like I'm slowly but surely becoming Canadian. So what are some of the some of the potential opportunities that lie in the settling in phase. So is there a way for brands to play a role in becoming that bridge back home? Is there a way for brands to give newcomer Canadians that feeling of, let's bring some of your home to you, whether it is through foods or whether it is through setting up events where they can get together? On the other side of that, is there an opportunity for brands to assist Canadians establish that sense of belonging? Is there an opportunity for them to guide newcomers on their long-term goals? So not looking at right now, but their future, buying a home, planning for retirement. Is there a way that brands could actually close that gap? Could they even create events that integrate newcomers with Canadians? So it's all good that they want those ties back home, but they're also eager for that sense of belonging. So this is my last personal story for the day. As you can see, me, my wife, and 2 kids, big smiles on our face. We've been here for 9 months and we are 100% settled. It feels like we've been here for long. We have friends. It feels like we have a support system that we didn't have before. We have our cars. We have a fully furnished house. We are stable. We are happy. If you have a look at the top right corner there, that's one of the community get-togethers that I spoke about in the previous slides. And this is also why I enjoyed working on this community so much, because everything that we're talking about, as you can see with these personal stories that I've shared with you, I almost had a story myself relating back to what we heard throughout the community. And that really ties back to people might come to Canada for different reasons. They might leave their country for different reasons, but the things that they do, regardless of where they're coming from, once they arrive, getting themselves settled in, is very similar in every way. So to conclude this webinar, immigration is an emotional roller coaster filled with fear, uncertainties, and challenges with many tasks to do, but there is that excitement about starting a new life in Canada. So for brands to be relevant and stand out, they need to focus on what they can do to alleviate some of these challenges and bring peace of mind to newcomers coming into Canada. There's a lot of time, convenience and certainty actually overtrumps the brand itself. And lastly, brands really need to meet newcomers where they are in the journey and look at them different to Canadians or different ethnic groups that have already been in Canada for a certain amount of time. The needs that they have are very different to people that have been here for a while. They are really starting their life from scratch. So I wanted to thank everybody for joining the webinar. I hope everybody found this insightful. I wanted to recap a little bit. The community that we use to gather these insights, like I said, we've shared with you a small little piece of the insights that we have already gathered from the community. As you can see, because it is a community, they are really engaged. It is qualitative by nature, so we're getting really rich insights out of the community. This community lives on and is continuing to grow. So if you do want to tap into the community, please feel free to reach out to me. My email address is on the screen, and I'll be more than happy to set up a call and walk you through what we do have available and how you can make use of the community in future. And that there brings us to the end of the webinar. I'm going to have a look quickly. We don't have much time left, so I just want to see if there are any questions that I could possibly answer. I'm not going to be able to get through all of them, but I will respond to any questions that have been posted after the webinar. I'll reach out to you directly. So one of the questions that we have here is, how can a brand tap into this market while maintaining authenticity? So really good question, and the answer is quite simple. It's through empathy and really understanding newcomers, and I think that's what makes the community quite great, because it isn't a community platform. It is a community where we ask them questions, we listen to them, we can discuss, and we can ideate with them, so we can really gain that granularity. One more question before we close off. So how do your subscriptions work for this community? How could we access it and ask specific questions about our brand? So like I mentioned, the community is available in two different elements. We have data that we have collected already, syndicated data, that do answer a lot of questions. I think we asked a total of 79 open-ended questions with over 8,000 responses from the community. That's the one element. The second element is that the community is very much open 24/7 for our clients to tap into. I hope that answers the question. And I think that is it. Thank you everybody for joining.
I just want to step in, Robin, and thank you for today's really interesting presentation, and all your personal details really bring the insights to life. Thank you everyone for joining us. Of course, at any time, we welcome the opportunity to speak with you, so please feel free to reach out to us directly. That now concludes today's webinar. Have a wonderful day, everyone.